good morning and welcome to the Tuesday episode of Trends in the Papers on Mainland 98.3 FM, The Sound of Lagos. My name is Sage Babalola, I'm your moderator for the morning, and it's a delight to have you join us as always on radio. Well, it is the Morning Express. We get to run through an array of programs from 5 a.m. all the way to 11 a.m. and Trends in the Papers happens to be one of said programs. We bring to you stories that have been published in the papers as to keep you abreast and up to speed with the daily occurrences in the country. It is Mainland 98.3 FM, The Sound of Lagos. Happening right now, as earlier introduced, is Trends in the Papers. My name, of course, is Sage Babalola, and I will not be bearing this responsibility alone this morning, as I already have via the phone line joining me virtually for analysis and context to the stories that we would be looking at as we address the headlines on the front pages of our dailies. Fouad Said, our in-house analyst, is here this morning. Fouad, good morning to you. How are you today?
Good morning, Sage. I'm good.
You sound excited. What happened?
I sound excited?
Yes, like you're happy. Why?
Well, you have to keep hope alive.
Fouad, you have money. You tell us where you are getting that money from.
you are praying for me. Like
Fouad, tell us. Fouad, I'll not tell anybody. Please.
I claim the prayer. I claim the prayer this morning. I say amen to it. I have money.
Anyways, if you have money, we have money too, so it doesn't matter. But I'll be rich by extension because I know you.
But we have to keep hope alive.
Of course.
So those things, we have to just make ourselves happy.
Definitely. I share in your optimism. All right. So we have the papers with us, the Guardian newspaper, the Punch, we have the Nation, and we have Vanguard newspaper. Let's kick off conversation today by looking at what the Guardian newspaper has for us. As it is their usual practice, they give us some sort of insight into a particular sector of the economy. And as it stands right now, they're still looking at the oil sector. As the major headline here reads, the federal government strained to meet 650 million barrels target over crude-backed loans. That's the headline. Now, there are quite a number of riders here. Loss may hit $10.73 billion as country fails to meet production benchmark in last 10 years. Forex crisis to persist amid elusive economic diversification plan. Tinubu, National Assembly jettison economic analyst, place economy recovery on uncertain oil market. Stakeholders insist budget assumptions unrealistic. Now to the story in itself, we have Nigeria may fail to produce about 138 million barrels of crude oil worth $10.73 billion in 2024, even as President Bola Tinubu sets Nigeria's 28 trillion naira 2024 budget on unrealistic oil and gas outlook that has consistently failed in the last 10 years. Now, while President Bola Tinubu is projecting to increase revenue from oil and gas from 2.23 trillion in 2023 to 7.69 trillion in 2024, which represents a 344% increase relative to 2023. Oil production is expected to move to 1.78 million barrels per day against the current 1.250 million amidst uncertain prices. So just to simplify all of this many words and complexities and everything, now we have the Guardian drawing our attention to the fact that for revenue generation for 2024, unfortunately, we still have a government that is relying heavily on oil, despite the fact that the oil market remains uncertain amidst our forex crisis. They still believe very strongly that most of our revenues are going to come from oil production, which is quite hilarious because in 10 years, according to this report, we've not even been able to meet our production benchmark. So they think it's unrealistic and risky to place your economic growth on an uncertain market. And the fact that the National Assembly, despite all of the campaign and crusading that they did for non-oil revenue like agriculture, tourism, they don't seem to be paying as much attention as they promised they will. But instead, they've gone back to old behavior and they're depending on our oil revenue. Fouad?
Well, again, Sage, the Guardian newspaper trying to look at the figures, looking at data, realistic data, looking at economic indices, and also, calling our attention to the fact that, look, we are not completely in a good place. Again, I think what the Guardian newspaper has consistently done in recent times is to get Nigerians thinking. Because again, the fact is the fact. We are all entitled to our own different opinions. but we are not entitled to our own set of facts. The fact is the fact. And the fact that one can bring out of this particular story that the Guardian newspaper has brought up this morning is that, look, our 2024 budget has passed and signed into law is based on unrealistic projections, especially the unrealistic projections from the oil sector.
Yeah.
Because a larger chunk of that particular budget, the assumption is that it will be financed from revenue from the oil sector. And that's unbelievable, because consistently that sector has proven to be so unreliable. If you understand, that's what the Guardian newspaper is drawing out. The fact that, look, all of our projections, about the 28 trillion naira budget, is based on a very unreliable and unrealistic oil sector. If you look at the figures, say, the Guardian newspaper is telling us that, look, we've not been able to meet our quota, the OPEC quota. Consistently, we've not been able to do that. And it's not even sure that in 2024, we're going to be able to do that. I think the budget is hoping that we can consistently do about 1.7 million barrels of production daily. That in itself is a very tall order. We are not sure that we can actually achieve that. Now, there's also things you are not paying attention to. We have a lot of loan obligations that we signed to pay using crude oil. The loans we got from the African Bank and all of these other loans are there. And all of those repayments are on production of crude oil that we have to meet up to. There are timelines to these things. You understand? There's also the fact that we have these oil swap, food swap kinds of arrangement. There are different kinds of arrangement that, that report is talking about. And ultimately, we're also in a very volatile period because of, the troubles in the Middle East, the possible escalation of the Israeli-Gaza war, the Russia-Ukraine war is not abating, and all of that. So we are in uncertain times when it comes to global economy, and especially what could happen to the oil sector. So we have a budget, like we always say, these are just mere projections. We've talked about the fact that, look, from the projection of government deficit about 9-point-something trillion. It could well go up if our revenue projections and earnings are not adding up at the end of the day, which is what the Guardian newspaper is saying. And it's also saying that, look, we are not even talking about how to diversify the economy. We are not looking at revenues in other sectors. I agree completely that, look, we cannot just be a mono economy year in, year out to keep running a budget that is solely on the oil sector, which, like I said, is completely unreliable, whether we like it or not. But it is what it is. The figures are there for people to check out. The story is there in the Guardian newspaper for people to read and get them thinking about where we are and also begin to plan for themselves. But ultimately, Sage, and that's why when governments come in and then they begin to give budgets, all manner of names, like this year's own is budget of reduced hope, right?
Yes.
But if you look at the figures, look at the facts, like I said, the government and their officials are entitled to their different opinions on what this budget is supposed to engender for Nigeria. But the government is not entitled to their own set of facts. Because the fact is that, look, from what we have, from the data, from the figures, from all of the calculations and indices, there's nothing that is renewable in this particular budget in the form of hope. You understand what I'm saying? There's nothing, I must tell you. And to make the matters worse, say, look at the kinds of appropriation we now have in that budget. Let us even say we are dealing with the fact that, look, we may not be able to make this amount of money, we may not be able to raise this revenue, the budget deficit could still go up, we may be dealing with supplementary budgets that would have to take care of some things and all of that, in the year.
Yeah.
But it is all made worse by the fact that we now have, so many reckless appropriations in that budget. Things that don't have any direct impact on the growth, economy, or the living standards of Nigeria, all captured in this particular budget. So if you ask me, it is what it is. We are not in a good place, and I don't see a way out. We just have to find a way to deal with it and live with it.
Right. Well, our oil output is right now the lowest that we've had in decades. In many years. So that is why, once again, experts are saying with this figure, knowing that your oil output is the lowest right now, you're still depending on that sector. They find it to be rather unrealistic. Anyways, you can really understand these figures if you go through the Guardian newspaper and check page 6 more specifically, so that you can have an insight into the full story. We're still looking at the Guardian newspaper. We have here, Nigeria's inflation ends 2023 at 28.9% as naira anxiety worsens outlook. The riders, food inflation nears 40%. Economists urge government to tackle forex volatility. Experts see gradual easing, bank on reforms. Now, Nigeria's headline inflation closed 2023 slightly below the 30% market projected by many economists and research organizations, including KPMG. But the slower increase, which puts the headline inflation at 28.92%, as per data released by the National Bureau of Statistics yesterday, is not enough to calm the rising nerves on the look of general price change. Economists and allied professionals have now warned that unless urgent steps are taken to stabilize the foreign exchange market, the falling naira is a prelude to a more precarious year. So let me just say this before Fuad and I converse on this story. Now, as it stands right now on the black market, naira exchanges to a dollar at 1,260, and on the official market, it's 1,000 naira to a dollar, and they are warning that the currency can even tank further in the coming months. Fuad, our inflation figures have once again gone up. This is actually the highest that we've had in 21 years at 28.9%. We have been operating at a double-digit inflation before, but never before has it been this high, at least in 21 years. And they're saying even food inflation is approaching the 40% mark, with rice, cereals, staple food basically continuing to rise. And they're saying the forex volatility is going to be a problem. It's going to further exacerbate this matter, and they're even telling us or preparing us that the year might be even more precarious than what we have seen or what we have prepared for. What?
Yes, well, see, I'm not honestly. Sometimes you not too good when back to back you have stories that continues to point to the fact that Nigerians have to find a way to brace up for what is going to come or what is already coming. If you understand what I'm saying, we've just read the fact that look, the entire budget for this year is projected on realistic data and expectations. Now we're talking about inflation figures, we're talking about headline inflation, we're talking about food inflation, we're talking about volatility in the forex market. And, if you look at everything, it's almost, I really don't want to use the word hopeless. We are not in a hopeless situation. But where is the commitment to fixing the problem? That's the issue for me. Because, again, we are not the only country, for example, that is faced with this kind of problem or that has faced problems like this. But what is lacking is the discipline, commitment, and intention to fixing these problems. If you understand what I'm saying.
Yes.
Because again, we've always talked about these inflation figures. Now it's about 28.something%. Food inflation is about 40%. Unfortunately, the level of insecurity in the country at this time is going to make that worse. I'm sure in the Punch newspaper, but by the time we get to the Punch newspaper, we'll talk more about the state of insecurity, in the country, the rising, level of insecurity in the country, stage. And then you also look at the issue of the forex crisis. How do we put a stop to the free fall of the naira against the dollar? It looks a very simple question, but I've spoken to experts, I've had conversations with people that should know. We've looked at the figures, we've looked at the indices, and everything looks bleak, Sage. And that's why, recently an expert was telling me, an expert that should really know, was telling me that if I'm not careful, even before the end of the year, the dollar could hit 2,000 naira. Before the end of the year, if we're not careful, if we don't begin to do serious things to taming this free fall of the naira against the dollar, we could hit 2,000 before we know it. You know, all through last year, any part of last year, we're all saying, God forbid, oh, the dollar would not hit 1,000 naira. It has hit 1,000 naira now. Nigerians are learning to live with it, and it's still a free fall for the naira. So, again, the government has the job in their hands. This is not the time to blame anybody. Luckily, the president has said that, look, he called for the job, and he's not expecting anybody to pity him. So we're expecting that, look, his think tank, you know, the people within the government that are advising him would have to sit down and really find a way to do the real work of governance. We are not in a very good place. And if all of these three things you are talking about, headline inflation, food inflation, free fall of the naira against the dollar, if we don't quickly do something about it, we are going to snowball into serious economic crisis that will now bring other problems for the country. One of them will be serious insecurity in different parts of the country.
Right. Also on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper, if you're just joining us, this is Trends in the Papers on Mainland 98.3 FM, the sound of Lagos. My name is Sage Babalola. Fuad Side is also here. Together we're looking at the papers. We're actually looking at the Guardian newspaper right now, reading to you the headlines and having Fuad give us more understanding of these headlines. We're live on Facebook and YouTube where we're streaming the program. So please go to social media, follow us, like, share, and definitely join the program. So please go to our Facebook page. We're streaming live. You can participate and watch us live in the studio at Mainland 98.3 FM. That's how you can get us on Facebook and also on YouTube at Mainland 98.3 FM. You can listen to us via Radio Guardian as well. So please go to Radio Guardian. It's the same handle at Mainland 98.3 FM. Just search the station frequency and you can listen to us via Radio Guardian. We're also on X or Twitter if you like at Mainland FM. But right now, if you want to participate on the show, go to Facebook or YouTube at Mainland 98.3 FM. All right, moving forward with more stories on the front page of the Guardian newspaper, we have here 7 richest Africans wealthier than the poorest half of the continent's population. I'll say that again. 7 richest Africans are wealthier than the poorest half of the continent's population. Now, a report by Oxfam has revealed that Africa's 7 richest men own more wealth than the 700 million people who make up the poorest half of the continent's population. We're not talking about Nigeria now, we're talking about Africa as a whole. So we have 7 men who own more wealth than 700 million people in Africa. Now, the document, which is on inequality and global power, has also pointed out that 7 out of the 10 of the world's biggest corporation, some with significant presence in Africa, have a billionaire as a chief executive officer or a principal as shareholder. Now, the document even further revealed that for the past 3 years, a surge in extreme wealth has solidified while global poverty remains mirrored at pre-pandemic levels, and also explained that the world's 5 richest men have more than doubled their fortunes to $869 billion since 2020. And this gap between the rich and the poor would likely increase, and before the end of 2029, I believe we probably will be crowning the world's first trillionaire within a decade. Forward, this report is highlighting the fact that we have 7 people who have more money than 700 million people in Africa. And they're saying that this gap, well, of course, Fuad, we can blame things like crony capitalism, the fact that the wealth continues to circulate amongst the number of people, especially private organizations. So I'm asking the question, how is it that the government as an entity is unable to tap from this wealth that seems to be available for those in the private sector, such that we have a number of people that we can count on our fingers having more money, solidifying their wealth, over 700 million people in the African continent? Forward.
You see, let's look at Africa stage. The reality is that, look, if you check these so-called wealthy Africans who, you know, if you aggregate all their wealth, are richer than over 700 million Africans put together. You know what you're going to see?
What?
You will always find conflict of interest and vested interest of government in those businesses. I don't know whether you understand what I'm saying.
I'm with you.
You would find, if you dig deep into these so-called wealthy Africans, what you will see is a conspiracy of people in government with these so-called wealthy Africans to corner the wealth of their nation, or give opportunity for these so-called wealthy people who probably are holding this wealth in proxy for people in government. And that's just the reality. And I'm not going to go personal. I'm just saying that why, you have seven wealthy people, and more people are getting poorer in Africa, a larger percentage. I think the entire population of Africa is currently put at about 1.8 billion, an average. So if you look at it, more than half of Africa's population, as it is considered completely poor. More than half of Africa's population live below $1 per day. But look, the reason why there's that gap, that big margin between the rich and the poor in Africa, at every country you get to, is that, look, there seems to be a conspiracy between the so-called business class and the people in government. So what you have is a situation where most countries, work only for a few. And the reason why that is because there's a conspiracy between the so-called guys in the business world and the people in government. So what they do is that they corner the resources of their different nations for only a few. And so what they do, by extension, is to weaponize poverty. When you weaponize poverty to a particular point, you are able to control the people. You are able to hold on to power. You are able to make them feed from crumbs that fall from the master's table. And that's why you have widespread poverty across Africa. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality of Africa. That conspiracy between, the people in government and the people in the business world to corner the resources, the God-given resources of Africa for a few people. And that's why Africa has continued to remain a poor continent and miss all of the blessings of God. So you have only a few who benefit, who inherit, who live large, while the rest live in poverty and are heavily impoverished. That's just the reality. So I'm not moved by this particular. So it is what we know. It is what we know.
Fuad, it's such a paradoxical situation because these individuals actually have most of their investment in Africa. So probably those who patronize them the most are Africans. Of course, they have international affiliation. So they have their business in Africa. So how is it that with so many poor people, they're able to get such profitability on a business in a continent that is supposed to be poor? Do you understand the paradox of this situation?
You see, we are just saying the same thing, Sage. And like I said, I don't want to go personal so that we don't keep mentioning people. But what I'm saying is that, look, you see, a society can only work for a greater number of people when the foundation itself is not structured to favor only a few. What we are saying is that, look, yes, they have these businesses in Africa, but what is the foundation of that business? What is the operational model of that business? Are these not the same set of people who, whether by connivance or how do you put it now, are able to move government monies into these businesses to run it? These are some of the guys that even collect monies from banks without repaying. These are the same guys who get tax waivers, while the other people don't get. So what we are saying is that, look, we structure the business environment for these few people, just for a few set of people within and outside of government.
The monopoly of the market.
Yes. Sorry, say.
I said the monopoly of the market, monopoly of the market.
Okay, for example, look at in Nigeria, for example. Every time we talk about some sectors and we say, it's a free market economy. There's no monopoly. But, in that same free market economy, you give some other people the advantage, whether access to forex, you give them some form of facility and all of those kind of things. Whereas the same people who are trying to come into that sector to operate, they are stifled from being able to participate actively in that same market. And it is a free market economy. We see these things, we know these things. Let's not deceive ourselves. We have structured everything to favor only a few. And if you get why those people are highly favored, it is because they own some of this wealth in proxy for people in government. That's just the reality of Africa.
Well,
we don't need to deceive ourselves.
This story is on page 3 of the Guardian newspaper. Moving forward, also on the front page of the Guardian, federal government's 35,000 naira wage award remains till new minimum wage, NLC declares. The Nigeria Labour Congress has said that the 35,000 wage award agreement with the federal government will continue until a new minimum wage is determined. NLC President Joe Ajaero said this in an interview with the news agency of Nigeria. Now, we should recall that President Bola Tinubu had on the 1st of October approved 35,000 as provisional wage increment for workers for 6 months, and this was all part of an agreement that was reached by the organized labor to cushion the effect of fuel subsidy removal. Now, Joe Ajaero is saying we did not sign a 6-month wage agreement with the federal government. We signed a wage agreement that will be in existence until the new minimum wage is determined, and we are in the process of collating the compliance of the federal government on the payment of wage award, and we have even had a conversation with the leadership of the Trade Union Congress on this, end quote. There's more, he said more things, but then that's the aspect that really conveys the message we're trying to talk about this morning on radio. So for the agreement that the president, I think it was 10 points that was in that MOU.
It was supposed to be 6 months. I think it was supposed to be for 6 months.
Yeah, 6 months. But then Joe Ajaero is saying that that's not what they agreed with the government. The agreement was this increment of 35,000 will be paid until you determine a new minimum wage. 30,000 naira is unrealistic.
How
So
consistently are they even getting?
they've paid
35,000
September.
naira?
They said they will pay the rest soon. So
No, at least the information we had the last time was that it was paid last in September.
yes, but they've said they will pay
Eh?
soon. They said they will pay soon. Let's believe that
They say they will pay. I'm just saying, because if Joe Ajaero say what they agree with the government is that they continue to pay the wage award until the minimum wage is agreed
Yes.
on, and I think there's supposed to be a committee, government stroke labor committee that's supposed to look into what they are saying is supposed to be a living wage, and I think that's supposed to start, at sometime in April this year. So, but the issue of the wage award, I don't know whether it's 6 months or it's continuous until when the minimum wages has been on. I just think that the fact that the money is not even coming at the right time to bother somebody like Joe Ajaero, the NLC president, he should be worried that whatever they have even agreed on, whether it's for 6 months or for endless period of time until the minimum wage agreement is made, the fact that it's not even coming consistently, because this money, the time value of money. If you agree to pay somebody a particular amount of money, you should pay. Money becomes useful when you pay at the right time.
Right.
See,
I'm with
so
you for it.
it is what it is. I don't know the strategy the labor unions would adopt this particular government to ensure they keep to their promises and agreements. But I'm already getting worried that a simple thing as a wage award of 35,000 naira is not coming as consistent as it should be.
Fuad, before we
You
move away,
understand?
before we move away from the story, what is a realistic minimum wage? What do you think it should be pegged at? Because remember we had conversations.
I didn't hear you.
I said, before we move on, what do you think would be a realistic figure for minimum wage? Remember we had conversations when the NLC and the TUC said they want 200,000, a reasonable amount that we can peg minimum wage at, since we don't want 30,000. What
Okay,
is
the projection for minimum wage?
how much? Yes, how much do you think is reasonable and realistic?
The labor is I think the labor is looking at
200,000.
minimum
Fuad,
wage.
we know that's a joke. I mean, it's a joke.
It's not.
It's a
But if you
joke,
look at the
Fuad.
economic situation of the country. No. See, let's even do a simple calculation.
Okay.
How much was a liter of fuel when the government came in? How much are we buying fuel now?
Yep.
So look at the percentage of increase in the price of PMS. Then what was the naira to $1 when the government came in? Then let us also look at the bag of rice. What was the price of a bag of rice when the government came in? How much are we buying a bag of rice now? So if you look at that calculation as against minimum wage and what the labor is demanding for, you can't fault labor's argument, can you?
We're not faulting their argument, but we're saying the reality of that money being paid.
The reality is that
That's what we're saying.
Nigerians are living the tough time for Nigerians and workers because of how these things have galloped. So again, it's going to be a lot of back and forth, I'm sure, between government and organized labor. But why labor sometimes takes some of these hard stance when they are negotiating with government is that, look, they keep telling government that you tell us there's no money there's no money, please bear with us, we can't pay this amount of money. But look at the way you are living. Look at the kinds of appropriations you are making. You are using 30 billion to want to renovate the National Assembly. You are using 3 billion to build a park. You are using 5 billion to renovate the house of the president. You want to use 15 billion to build a perpetual residence for the vice president in Abuja. You can't be appropriating monies in that manner and be telling labor you can't pay 100,000 or 200,000 minimum wage. You don't understand. Because what we have seen consistently from government is that the thing that concerns the poor masses is what they give excuses for. The monies that concern the masses, that one can cause inflation. But the reckless spending of the ruling class can never cause inflation. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it will be difficult for anybody to want to force the argument of labor if they are becoming very hard in their demands from government. Because the government has not even shown enough discipline, enough fiscal and monetary discipline, that confirms or contours to their own argument that there's no money in the country. How can you be telling me, for example, there's no money in the country, whereas in the budget you want to use 30 billion to renovate the National Assembly? How does that make any sense?
I don't have the answer for it. But this is on page 4 of the Guardian
because
newspaper.
What I would do if I'm a labor leader is to just bring the budget before them and say, look at your appropriations. Argue with me that there's no money in this country to pay me 200,000 minimum wage.
Again, it's on page 4 of the Guardian newspaper. We're still looking at the Guardian newspaper. We're live on Facebook and on YouTube, so join us via our streaming platform, Mainland 98.3 FM on Facebook and on YouTube. You can also drop your submissions on there as we're going through the story one after the other. When it's time to start taking contributions, I would read the messages that you have dropped on our Facebook platform. Now, moving forward, we have here NNPCL shops for net worth investors to manage Port Harcourt refinery. It's on page 3 and it reads, Nigeria National Petroleum Company Limited has asked refinery managers across the world, especially original manufacturers who have maintained at least $2 billion yearly turnover in the last 4 years, to take control of the Port Harcourt refinery. Now, let me skip to some of the expectations in the expression of interest. Now, they're saying that the financial details of the organization must be audited in the last 4 years. They must have experience working in Nigeria and other African countries as a record of local content compliance. The company has said the contract would be long-term and short-term production and operations, which would include planning, production, operation execution, monitoring, reporting and optimization of operation, maintenance in the short term, maintenance execution, reliability and inspection. And it added that the Lucky firm would also process and undertake engineering quality control, quality assurance, specialist engineering, health and safety, environmental management, turnaround maintenance, planning and execution of minor projects, non-hydrocarbon procurement and subcontractor management, amongst other things. So Fuad, I mean, a lot of people have advised that if the government are not sure of their capability of handling the refinery, maybe ask private hands to support you in this endeavor, and they might have listened, because now they're calling for, bigwigs in the oil sector to take over the Port Harcourt refinery in the short term. They take care of it, and I don't really have details of what the agreement is going to be further in the future, but they're just calling for investors to participate in the running of the Port Harcourt refinery. That's a good thing, right? Hello? Oh, apologies. Let's try to get Fuad back on the line before we jump to that story. I really want to hear his perspective on this particular story, especially because it involves the Port Harcourt refinery, which is going to be is supposed to start production by this month. Fuad?
Yes, I'm with you.
Did you hear? Yeah, did you hear what I said?
Yeah, of course, I heard.
Yes, please go ahead.
Again, there are people who are now worried that, look, the conversation initially was that, look, we're going to get this refinery back to work. That's the Port Harcourt refinery. There was a timeline for December. The best we were able to do was to complete mechanical work on the 60,000, the first phase of the refinery.
Yeah.
Like we've always explained, the Port Harcourt refinery has two phases. There's the first one, which is the old one, with a 60,000 barrels per day capacity, while the other one is 150,000 barrels per day. I'm not sure we are even doing anything on the second one, which has a bigger capacity. Now, well, the government is still promising that, look, plus or minus, with all of their calculations, before the end of January, or maybe before the end of the fourth quarter, that refinery will be ready for operation. Now they are looking for people to come, run, maintain that particular refinery. Again, we are not against any idea of government to get the refineries back to work. All of our refineries, we've always said it, whether privatization, concessioning, whatever can be done to get those refineries back to life, because it's just a waste of national resources to keep those refineries moribund for that long. So, but again, we hope that, because again, this is looking more like a concession arrangement. This particular one now, it's not outright privatization. See, you know, we are selling the refinery. But there are people who will still tell you that what would be the level of government involvement in the maintenance management of this refinery now? If you understand what I'm saying, what would be the role of the NNPCL, and what would now be the role of those investors? And what are they investing? Are they investing their money? We need to understand what the operational model would be, you know, so that we have some clarity, and then we don't run into another set of trouble where there's now lack of transparency in the entire process. If you understand, because again, what I've seen, I've read what the expression of interest document is. It basically come to run, maintain this particular refinery. In what capacity? As a concessionaire or as a partner with the NNPCL? If you understand what I'm saying.
Yes. Well, the report highlights the responsibility, the things expected of them, but we don't know if they are coming, you know, as partners or as concessionaire. We don't know what that is.
That's what I'm saying. We need to know. Yeah. You know, in what capacity are you coming to run that refinery and manage? As a partner or as a concessionaire? And then what will be the terms of agreement? What are supposed to be, you know, the deliverables? And what then will be the role of the NNPCL, the owner of the refinery as it is now? Right. So there are still one or two questions there and there that one needs to get on this particular, because again, it just coming suddenly. It wasn't as if when we're getting that, initially the conversation around the refinery was that, look, it was going to get operational, and then suddenly now we're getting, you know, a conversation around the expression of interest for people to come and maintain the refinery. But we need to get more information, because again, like I said, this is not looking like a kind of privatization. It's looking like a kind of concession, kind of arrangement. But I think there are still unanswered questions around what has now been put out on running the Port Harcourt refinery. We just have to wait to see whether more details will come up. We would have to speak with an energy expert. I try to see how I can put this before Adiola Yusuf and see what we can get out of it.
All right, wonderful. It's on page 3 of the Guardian newspaper. Now to other stories we have here. Incessant kidnappings on Settle Abuja residents. Federal government urged to declare emergency on capital city. Huriwa canvasses judicial panel to expose conspirators. Terrorist attack joint military camp in Katsina. Now, for the opt-in time, residents of the Federal Capital Territory are highly unsettled following widespread insecurity around the outskirts, characterized by...
We want to take this story with that of Punch, so that we just put it together. The major headline on the Punch.
Okay, yeah. Abduction epidemic spreads nationwide. Kidnappers move from expressway to Lagos. Actually, the Guardian actually captures this. Abuja city centers, abductors kill 2 young victims, demand 700 million ransom for 9 others. Let me read the body of the story so that we can just have everything together like you advised. I apologize, I'm trying to get to the story. All right. Meanwhile, kidnappers who abducted 10 persons from Sagwari Estate Layout at Duse in Buari area have reportedly killed 2 more of the victims to send a strong warning to their relatives and negotiating ransom payment. Fuad, you remember the kidnapping of 10 people? The father was released. One of the eldest daughter was killed to facilitate the quick payment. Yes, she was killed to facilitate the quick payment of the ransom. I think they've been able to raise the money. Even Isa Pantami was amongst those who was trying to raise the money to pay the ransom. But now the reports are telling us that as much as we thought this was going on in the West, it has actually moved to urban centers. It's in Abuja, it's in Lagos, it's moving to Ogun State, amongst other things. They are no longer restricted to certain areas that we thought was mostly their ground of operation. What does this mean for us as a nation?
Well, Sage, it's important that we talk and really dig into these 2 stories as captured by the Guardian newspaper and the Punch. I'm sure it's also captured in other daily newspapers.
It's on every paper. It's on every paper.
Now, we are faced with another serious problem. You know, well, insecurity has been part of us for some time. It's become a monster that we have not been able to tame, but it's getting to a new level of insecurity now. See, in Abuja, what we are seeing in Abuja, or what is being reported in Abuja, is that, look, these bandits and kidnappers are not even kidnapping people on the highways again. They're actually moving into private residences and estates to pick families up. Like the story of the man with her 6 children, where the eldest daughter has now been killed. Isa Pantami, the former minister under Buhari, you know, you remember the man that brought in NIN and all of this that troubled Nigerians so much. Remember the argument there was that NIN was going to, you know, stop people from getting money, ransom, blah, blah, blah. The same man had to now say that, look, a friend, his own friend, had to raise 50 million to pay ransom to kidnappers. See, you see the irony?
Yes.
This is what he said, Isa Pantami, that brought NIN, brought all manner of things when he was the Minister of Digital Communications. And I remember that when he was even in the Buhari government, and there was talk about the high state of insecurity in the country, the same Isa Pantami issued a statement then that people were hyping insecurity across the country just to paint the Buhari government black. The same Isa Pantami said it then, that it was just people were overblowing the conversations around insecurity just to paint the Buhari government black. The same Isa Pantami now has now come out to say, you know, why crowdfunding was going on to save this man and his daughters from these kidnappers, while the first daughter had been gruesomely murdered, that a friend helped him to raise 15 million to pay to kidnappers. See, that is the story of Nigeria. The fact that we like to live in denial, when the facts are there for us to admit and look for workable solutions and commit to solving the problem. Now, it's not only that man now. We're also getting stories. I think there's even a story of a lawyer who has now also lost one of his children to kidnappers. They demanded for ransom. The man has not been able to raise the money. They've killed the man's first son or first daughter in Abuja too. And in all of these, if you read the papers very well, where is the minister of the FCT?
There's actually a headline here: Wike fiddles with Rivers politics while Abuja burns. It's on the full page of the Punch.
The FCT minister has his mind, body and spirit on Rivers politics. Say, Abuja is not like any other city in Nigeria. That's the federal capital territory.
Yes.
If there's a territory in Nigeria that's supposed to be the most secure, it's supposed to be Abuja. So if Abuja is not secure, then are we not in trouble? If Abuja, the FCT, the Federal Capital Territory of Nigeria, is not secured, and we are getting consistent reports of bandits and kidnappers moving into fringe villages and kidnapping people, killing them the way we have been reporting it now, then we're in trouble. We're in trouble. Don't you think?
But this audacity,
I'm sorry. Report and even the point, it's not Abuja matter. Even in Ogun, Lagos, and other parts of the country. So the question we need to ask ourselves, the current security model we have, can it work? Because if you say it's working, we're only deceiving that it's not working. But we can now push the conversation forward. Can it work? If it is not working now, are there things we can do to make it work? Because it's not just to change the service chiefs and then all of those kind of things. You remember when the IG was commissioned as IGP Egbetokun. He was talking tough. I'm a lion. I'm this. I'm telling the people that are going to go after them, blah, blah, blah. No. What has he been able to do now?
Fuad, is there really something one individual can do?
The figures are not looking good. Let's tell ourselves the truth. From May, when the president was inaugurated, till now, the figures are not looking good. The figures are disturbing.
Yeah.
The president has to quickly find solutions. There are too many things for the president to give solutions to. But he said we should not pick him. He demanded for the job. The job is here. He has to do it. As the chief security officer of the state, of the country, he's the #1 man. And the first job of any government is to protect the lives and properties of the people. That is not happening now, see.
Well, I mean, there's really nothing further to be said about this unfortunate incident. But then for the Guardian newspaper is on page 30. For Punch is on page 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7. As a matter of fact, this is the most prominent story that the Punch captured today for very understandable reasons. Well, I think that's about it for the Guardian newspaper. We can now proceed to more stories on the front page of the Punch, although we're almost out of time. But then there's a report here, Fuad, something of an appraisal of the Buhari's administration. It says 69 protesters killed, 189 journalists arrested under Buhari. Now, an international human rights organization called Global Right has said the administration of the former president Muhammadu Buhari was characterized by threats or intimidation of journalists and protesters. The organization added that Buhari made frantic efforts to suppress access to information, curtail freedom of expression, and monitor how and for what purposes citizens assembled. This report by Global Rights actually said a lot of things. It's just a number of accusations that I don't think we should even bring up on radio because, we don't want to aggravate the public. But then they're accusing the Buhari administration of deliberately suppressing the media and also suppressing protesters and preventing them from, making use of their rights to peaceful protest, amongst other things. Do you want to talk briefly about that?
Well, again, that's just a report that shows that the Buhari government was not really the friend of the media, and you cannot really fault that. He hardly even spoke to the media, local media. One or two times you see the president speaking to the media is when he's out there, and then of course, if they arrange media session, is arranged for him, and he does say one or two things. Really, he's not really someone that likes to talk to the media, and of course, people have also questioned his relationship with the media, owing to the fact that, look, he was somebody when he was in the opposition before he became president that benefited seriously from media coverage. We can never forget when Alhaji Lai Mohammed, for example, the Minister for Information, was in the opposition, and almost on a daily basis there was a press release criticizing the Jonathan PDP government. They had that good relationship with the media. A lot of their ideas were well ventilated through the media, but they got into power and the media became a problem. From the figures you are even saying from the report, became their enemy. So it is what it is, but what has now been the 8 years of the Buhari government? If you look at their scorecard, it's just complete failure for me. I'm sorry.
Anyways, well, it's on page 30 of the Punch newspaper. Let me just read through the other headlines with the minute that we have left for trends in the papers. Now, other stories on the front page of the Punch reads, OPS blames struggling Naira for highest inflation in 21 years. Well, the Forex crisis has been blamed for the inflation figures that we're seeing. It's on page 21. On page 22, we have 14 states spend 21 billion Naira on foreign trips despite zero foreign direct investment.
No single foreign direct investment.
Nothing, and they've spent 21 billion. No return. It's
passing around, though. Serious passing.
It's ridiculous. I mean, come on. EFCC to arraign ex-minister over unpaid 3.6 billion naira loan. Okay, the EFCC seems to be on something nowadays, but then I hope we see an outcome of all of these probes and investigation. Moving forward, we have Sanwo-Olu promises more projects with 2 trillion naira budget, and just like the headline we reference, Wike fiddles with Rivers politics while Abuja burns. That's that for the Punch newspaper. And for the Nation, we have MBS.
The man is not interested in Abuja. If you ask him, I'm not sure his mind is that Abuja at all.
Anyways, for the Nation,
he wants to be the governor of Rivers State. By proxy.
For the Nation, we have MBS puts inflation rate at 28.92%. We also have here NNPCL opens bid to privatize Port Harcourt refinery. And for Vanguard, gunmen run riots in Abuja, Enugu, Ekiti, Katsina, 3 others. A steady supply, our fight saboteurs in power sector. And electricity, Disco's revenue collection rises to 30% to 782.74 billion. They are all declaring profits, but the quality of service does not even match the amount of money that they say they are making. But that's about trends in the papers. Thank you for going along with us. Thank you for joining us via our live stream. We're going on a quick break, a commercial break. When we come back, it will be time for Mainland Focus. Don't go anywhere.
Clock the time.